I'll wait for a few more people to pop in here. Give everybody a chance. So I don't want to have to repeat stuff too much. This is going to be the first one, though, that we're doing, so it's going to be a little rocky. I'm going to figure out what works, what doesn't. I figured I'd make this a Google Doc right now because I wanted people who come in later to be able to look at it and kind of follow along. Not everybody's going to be able to edit it, but people are going to be able to look at it and see what we're doing. We're gonna take some creative liberties because I think part of a good healthy part of the exercise is to work within constraints. But if we can be a little bit more flexible and work outside the box while still adhering to the general rules, I think that will benefit these ideas a lot. So I'm gonna go into like my preface and some disclaimers in a little bit here. Well, while we wait for people, I got some new cards in the mail, so I'm gonna open those up. Wait for people. We got a full art bee. So pretty, so pretty. It's good. That's good. Is this one my other Machamp? Please be my Machamp. It is. Ooh-wee. Ooh-wee. There he is. There's that boy. There's that boy. I have no idea if this deck is gonna work, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my darndest to make it good. We'll go over some ideas because there are definitely some novelty ideas, and we're gonna have to work through a few. Let's see. I think more people are gonna filter in here as we go along. Maybe some people are put off because we're not in the Final Fantasy XIV directory right now, but enough people should be into this because this seemed to be a pretty popular idea, and even if it's not, it's gonna pick up. So yeah, Final Fantasy does seem to have some limitations on dots, and they've been moving away from that with Summoner. In general, I do like status effects, but 14 is just not the best place for it because of, you know, how the system is run. So prefer it more. I think you get some better stuff in like action combat. Monster Hunters are great. Multiplayer experience where you can make your effects stronger and multi-effects with certain weapons and all that stuff. But we'll talk about it. This is going to be a discussion. Some ideas will make it, some won't. I understand if people are upset or discouraged if your ideas are not used or if holes are poked in them. It's frustrating to have an idea and not feel like you're heard or understood. It's going to happen a few times. Not every idea can make it. And I hope that we can bypass some hurt feelings here and continue to move forward and hopefully come back to other ideas in the future once they've been a little bit more fleshed out, once we get a good process going, and then we can figure out how to actually make some of these things work. So we might start a little bit simpler. Let's get this started. First disclaimer, I am in no way, shape, or form officially associated with Final Fantasy XIV or Square Enix. I have talked to them. They've invited me out to the interviews and talking to Yoshi P and media tours, but I am not affiliated with the development team at all, even though some of our ideas in the past have been used pretty closely. So while they may be watching, they may be listening, we are not actually designing a class for Final Fantasy XIV. Officially, we are doing this as a fan project. We are doing this for fun. We are trying to give suggestions that maybe the dev team can pull from in the future, ideally. But right now we are going to be specifically looking at Final Fantasy XIV as a model, as our kind of container for how to design it. Where if we go too general, then the issue becomes what limitations are there in the future, and we're not quite ready to make a full game yet. So we're going to be using the existing framework of Final Fantasy XIV, what constitutes job, the job identity, how it functions within the game, and using those limitations to shape something hopefully unique, or we could do something that they've done before. They're talking about doing stuff completely unique classes to 14. I thought it would be fun to take up that challenge and do jobs that we haven't seen before and see what we can do, what we can make of it. Because Sage is very far out there with how they did the weapons. Pretty standard as far as like a shield mage, shield healer goes. But yeah, I think that's my mindset going into this. Can we come up with something creative that also will work effectively in 14? And there are a lot of ideals. Like I said, there's a lot of ideas that people have that are neat, that are interesting, but may not actually flesh out for one reason or another in the actual game. So please do not get discouraged if we poke holes in this. I hope that you guys can overcome that frustration. I know I still do. So if you're upset at all, if you're mad that, you know, an idea is rejected, or if, you know, it's being argued against, that's okay. I'm not gonna insult you. I'm not gonna call you a baby. I'm not going to disparage you for having those feelings. You do need to work them out, but it's okay that you're feeling them, because everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be understood. We're not trying to be rude. And so I encourage everybody else in the chat right now to adopt that same mindset. Let's not be that stupid. That's ridiculous. Let's be constructive. All right, be constructive, be respectful, and also take critiques as much as you can with you know, that mindset that we're not shutting you down. We are just talking about different ideas here. So yeah, we are talking about, let's think about this. So we've got, yeah, people have been mentioning the pirate. We have had Corsair in 11, so not entirely unique, but also not off the table. We could still go with something along those lines. Whether or not it would be, the challenge with that is going to be making sure that it's different enough from Rogue and Machinist. I know that those have their own, like we're going into from Rogue to Ninja, they have a lot of their own. I'm getting really irritated. My phone buzzing right now. Very specific job identities for that, so we just have to keep that in mind moving forward. I think that if the dev team would ever reconsider branching jobs, I don't think they will, but I agree with you. I would love to see an advanced job system where they start going into what we already have. And because I really liked, people argued against this because it's a balancing issue as usual. I think the 14 team does pretty well. It's not perfect, but they do pretty well where everything is at least viable. Where Black Desert did the Awakening and Succession. So one is, you know, the job or the class, and then the Succession, it expands on that, and then the Awakening would branch off and be like a new weapon type, a new move set, stuff like that. Gambler with cards, that would be interesting. I want Beastmaster as well, but we've already talked about what Beastmaster could be. They kind of made it with Reaper, but yeah, we've already discussed Beastmaster. We're gonna go another direction. I'm liking Corsair. If we're talking, I would like to make my suggestion as well. If we're talking casters, I really want them to flesh out Onmyoji, which could be this summoner Beastmaster hybrid, essentially. And, you know, similar, not really throwing cards, but they could throw like talismans and stuff like that. I think it would be a really cool support caster that we haven't seen yet. Saturating the Corsair might make it. Yeah, I think we can definitely do something different from 11. Yeah, similar to Bard and Dancer. Yeah. Let's put that down. We'll put down Corsair. I'm gonna put it in quotes because it's not gonna be exactly the you know, 11 one or a previous title, but it could be really interesting to. I personally really like that idea. I love the pirate theme, the swashbuckler. 3 to 4 dots with really short durations. Your opinion, physical range works best as a supporting style DPS. It could, but just because it works best right now doesn't mean that we can't diversify, and that's kind of the whole thing here. Is that you could still have things similar to WoW, where you place down a totem, or if you've gone through, I don't want to spoil anything if you guys haven't gone through the role quests, but also I'll say similar to how Geomancer was in 11, where you're putting down zones, buff zones, and they will give like different effects or help. So you're a zone controller as well as bringing forth different Shikigami to do 2 damage and stuff like that. That would be the idea. And your talismans, you could kind of like Astro throw out talismans to different members, but they would be like specific. They wouldn't be as random. Or you could like empower it with your Shikigami, something like that. Another physical engineer, maybe grenades and rockets, other small magitech. Yeah, I feel like that would just be elaborating more on machinist moving forward. I'll keep it in mind. But yeah, they've already teased that Onmyoji, one in the role quests for ranged, physical ranged, and in the last Heavenstern. So I thought they might go that direction, and it would be fun to kind of flesh it out and see if what we come up with is something that they would do. I'm gonna put it down. Nuts. Well, Drac putting down his own idea. But enough people seem to also enjoy that concept. Range was in Doma with Gosetsu, yeah, with yeah, all of them, Yugiri and handsome ponytail guy. So we've got, I think most people want another ranged, either a ranged or a caster right now. Really want a new class. Is some new usage of the offhand slot. It depends. It depends on, because the loot system for it is really jank right now. You know what I mean? They've made it a little bit better with some of the chests, but yeah, that'll all depend on, one, if we can justify it, and two, like the offhand slot would have worked great if, one, weapons had different effects on them, and there was like a dual wielding trait. But so far, it's you have your daggers, and those occupy your 2 hands, or you have a 2-hander. The only thing right now that stayed is the shield. So I'm not against. I love dual wielding stuff, but I don't think Final Fantasy XIV likes it, because at the moment there's really no diversity. Like, are you ever using a shield? I think at one point people did mix and match swords and shields. But for the most part, you're just using the same set. Like, weapons on their own are not particularly... Like, filling the offhand slot is just kind of to fill the offhand slot. It doesn't do a whole lot. Except for, you know, gatherers. That was still cool. But that's different. Would Onmyoji job be somewhat linked to the Four Lords? It could be. Definitely could be. I don't play a whole lot of Paladin Iron, so I'm not sure. Some people might. I'm pretty sure like there were some shields that had like a better parry or block rate, but I'm not particularly sure. Yeah, they still have to drop together. I wish it was a little bit more classic MMO where you had to like kind of go searching for cool new weapons, but it's very linear right now. It's a druid, a darker type caster is what people are saying, Void Master or druid. I think tapping into the void, considering where we're going in Endwalker, would be a really cool idea. I'm gonna put that down. Void, like Void Master, or what was the? I think Warlock is the kind of the theme, the vibe. Druid. Druid, I suppose, is more in theme of like nature. Necromancies. Yoshi P doesn't like it. Yoshi P will never put in Necromancer. Voidmeister, I'll do. Oh, the Maester. That would be, isn't it? With a Y? I don't know. Anyway. See, I think we'll fill up one more slot. Let's go between four options. Like the design of Rune Fencer in 11, the whole element-specific magical tank thing. Wouldn't translate to 14. Yeah, you'd have to 14ify it. It's kind of what, same way Red Mage was. Could you do a shared base class like Scholar Summoner? They also don't like that very much. I love, like, all the stuff you're talking about is super cool. I love branching classes and all these different jobs as much as people will be like, but there's always going to be a best. but they're still really interesting designs. And there are still plenty of people that love the roleplay aspect more than just straight numbers, as long as the job works. So I am not in any way, shape, or form declining that, you know, having shared base jobs or branching out or having, you know, multiple weapon slots are really cool concepts that I wish 14 had. But moving forward in the constraints of 14, I think we're going to try and avoid that. I was thinking, like, instead of Rune Fencer as a specific weapon, you'd have a crystal or a seal, and you would be basically Noctis. You would be summoning weapons as you needed, and then that would also fill a role of the melee ranged hybrid, where you have your ranged set and you're going between maybe a couple crossbows, a longbow. For your heavy one, you could just summon a ballista. Keep an eye on it. Thank you for the contribution, Ozma. Yeah, a lot of there's some really cool. Also, going into DNF Duel, Dungeon Fighter Online has some really cool, like, branching jobs. Really cool concepts. They did very well, I think. We've had somebody talk about, I think the cards we'll think about in Corsair. Kind of the piratey gambler mix is kind of where that's going. So we've got the cards in mind. Somebody, you're on the right track with some other people in chat. Sentient cloak or scarf would be difficult with, because they have a hard time with armor. But I get what you're saying. What could that be? Because just because it's a, like, I'm not going to go too hard on, you know, Black Mage already has a staff, because White Mage already has a staff, but they're different. Like, one's staff, one's rod. We could have a, what do you call it? Some conduit, focus, a focus. You could do a focus, you could do a crystal. It could just be a crystal and your character's like standing there like crystal ball. And that crystal is your conduit to the void. That'd be cool as well. Use it as arm wraps and then extend. Alright, yeah. Lulu with the effigy dolls, yeah. Scrolls. I would save scrolls for something like Onmyoji. Because they do the kind of Sai from Naruto thing. You could, I think they actually did that in 14 with the last Heavenstorm, where they painted and then summoned the creature out from that. But talisman, I think the Onmyoji would like throw the talismans for sure. I thought Doctor Strange as well when you brought that up. But yeah, it's just a matter of, is it going to interfere with the rest of the armor? They'd have to make it work with that. Though I suppose they have done things with Monk where it just covers the armor. It just takes off the handpiece basically, and that could work as well. So, chains, okay, interesting. Chains would be neat. I actually like the chain idea. Just thinking like they're kind of floating around you, and when you're bringing forth, you like open the portal, and then you're throwing the chains in and bringing out your Void Beast as part of the animation. That'd be kind of cool. I don't know if that would be like animation lock or hurt things too much, but that'd be neat. I agree with that sentiment. Semi-ranged tank. The only thing everybody talks about the ranged tank, but the only reason why I don't think it's gonna work in 14 anyway is because the boss will be moving all the time. You'd have to have a way to keep the boss in place and not follow the tank around. The only reason a ranged tank doesn't really work is that they're meant to hold the boss in place. That's kind of like the whole point with the 14 Trinity. You know what I mean? So if it's ever ranged and it pulls aggro, then it's just running around. Like that's frustrating. A lance with a hookshot chain and an axe blade. All right. Puppeteer. Okay. Puppeteer could work. Might be a little awkward positioning just with the placement tools and how slow because instead of just moving somewhere, you're gonna have to like, I guess if you know the fight enough, you can position it properly. Saying talisman, isn't that a little too close to Sage? How do you figure? Sage, I don't believe, uses talismans. How would the puppet being slapped about explain the tank's HP dropping? You could have it as a soul link, basically, like a mammoth that is connected to you. So basically, like connected to your life force. So you're, I don't know. It's just that concept, but yeah, that's how I would say. But with the way that they've, it would be, they'd have to rework the system again because pets are no longer targetable. So they'd have to revamp that again to make it so that it again works like another party member, and it currently doesn't. Yeah, as you know, that's kind of the idea there. Inquisitor tank could be neat. Judge is a ranged melee. Judge could be neat. The only thing with Judge is that I think it would be cool to do something like on the laws that they had in Tactics. Or Tactics Advanced. I didn't play enough of Tactics to see if they had any role, but the Tactics Advanced, that'd be neat, where they have those laws, and those are either the buffs for the party or debuffs for the enemies. The only problem with that is that Final Fantasy doesn't like debuffing enemies either anymore. So I will say the frustrating part about 14, I love the fight designs, but gosh dang it, is the combat so homogenized. People have been thinking about whips, nunchucks. I'd personally like to see a bow staff at some point. Time Mage, that's basically Astro at the moment, because I think the idea of Astro is that you are not healing but reversing the damage done on people. I know people want like a specific Time Mage, but they also, we had haste for a while and then they took it away. So that, like I said, there are a lot of really cool concepts that they just kind of axed. It's an element blade, melee DPS, focus on siphoning aether from the environment, empowering melee combos. Kind of the Spellblade idea we were bouncing around. The benefit of having so much stuff homogenized the way that they have is that it's easier to balance, but it's a lot less interesting for sure. Boomerang weapon, go oh, what's her name from Inuyasha? Sango, yeah, there you go. Yeah, somebody also brought up Puppeteer as a tank. I just don't really see, well, because for tank, you still want the heavy armor. They're in plate. But instead of a little puppet, maybe you can kind of go back to the engineer, a little bit of the judge aesthetic, and also, so engineer, judge, and puppeteer, put those together and have a Magitech. I don't want to say like Magitech Master, sounds lazy, but you know where I'm going with this? Where instead of a little mammoth, you have basically another suit of armor fighting with or for you. Artificer from D&D, kind of, yeah. I never played Zero, so I don't know about, I know the characters from Opera Omnia, but I don't know what they actually do. They can make their own Iron Man suit. That would be the idea. That would be the idea. And your weapon could be a controller or a console device. I think having, like, I like the idea of Puppeteer. It's just the commands for pet jobs, as cool as it is, just it's so jank. Or you want to be more precise in your movements. Again, you can still prepare. It's just a matter of they have to go back and code it in again so that pets can be targeted, or a specific pet can be targeted. Then, you know, it counts as another person, basically. So it would have that strength of being able to soak more damage. But I think a Magitech pilot would be really cool. So we're still like in the idea of you're making either a suit of armor, or you have an extra piece from you that you're, you know, connected to. And the Magitech suits are kind of like that one got emotionally attached to us, so we could still have, you know, you got a pet, right? Tank that can store damage taken and a bar that can be used for shielding, healing, or the tank's own damage. Yeah, and then they could use MP as a resource. So that something is being lost, they put their MP into like maintaining their suit. Could be a thing. So like if it ever dies, then you're losing a lot of your damage. So it could be a, you know, you just focus on putting your damage into that, the suit, or whatever it is, and then that would, it'd be interesting. It would be trickier to balance because, you know, thinking about pet damage and all that stuff. But we're looking at cool jobs right now. I think as long as it functions in the game, we can worry about balance at a later time. That's another idea. Yeah, Keynort. Sid would be, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Zeno, is that Sid and Nero would be our job trainers for that. That got a lot of people talking. That got a lot of people excited there. Should we pull the trigger on Magitech Pilot? Is that a decent enough compromise for everybody? Poll? Yeah, we'll do poll instead. Just so I can get a, if people don't feel comfortable like talking in chat, you can still, because I think in a 14 sense, staying away from pets, but also technically having a pet, similar to how Reaper has a pet but not really, and Summoner has a pet but not really. Do something like that. Yes, and then no, and then let's do 1 minute. Right now it's up. Poll is up right now. You might have to refresh the screen. I think it's up at the top of chat. And once we agree on number 4, I think we'll move on and start talking about ideas for each one. Pets are really hard to balance, make function smoothly. The idea is amazing. I love the idea of pet classes, and I loved it in 11. 11 was slow enough where you could, you know, just make your decisions. If it had the speed of 14, I think it would have played a lot smoother, but 11 is just a much different beast with how it's balanced, how the combat works. Okay, I think most people are good with it. All due respect to people who declined, I understand. It seems like we're going to be moving forward. Since more people are in here, I'm going to reiterate my disclaimer here. So I am in no way, shape, or form affiliated with Square Enix or the Final Fantasy XIV development team. We are doing this as fun and for my own personal practice. I said game developer before. I think the idea more accurately is game designer, since I have very, very little programming knowledge or prowess. I've done a little bit, but not enough to be a developer. I have been invited out to media tours and had opportunities to discuss and interview things with Yoshi P, but I am not an official member of the 14 team. This is all fan stuff. We are not saying that we are making an actual job for 14. If these things ever got picked up by the dev team, that would be super awesome. That's the dream, but it is not something that we are advertising that it is going to happen. We are not actually making a 14 job to be put into the game right now. We are just using the 14 game, Final Fantasy 14, as an idea, a container for what limitations are we going to put on these jobs to help with our design process. Because if we don't have any limitations, it's never going to stop for, well, it can do this and it can do that and it can do this. So 14 right now, we'd have to actually design a full game to go beyond this. So we're not ready for that. We're just going to borrow a framework, copy from what 14 is able to do, and see if we can make something that would feasibly be a viable option. Theory crafting for fun, yes. So I just want to make that clear. Some people are like, you're stepping into weird IP territory. I'm like, I've talked about Monk and Beastmaster and all this stuff for a while. So they've never told me to stop, and they actually put stuff in for the Monk that we've talked about before. So I think we're okay. Okay, so we're going to copy pasta these, and we're going to start off with the first one here, which is Corsair. Gambler Corsair Gambler, I think those are the two concepts that we were mostly going with. Hopefully by the end of the stream we'll be able to get all of these done. And then after this, everybody on Patreon, even if you're only subbing for $1, they will be voting on which of these we will be pursuing in the future. And then that doesn't mean that these are going to stop. Like these are not going in the trash if we don't use them right now. Is what I'm saying. We can always come back to them in the future, but for the first one that we're going to be working on, which maybe you don't want your idea to be the first one, because then we're not working out all the kinks yet, and I might not get as many cool ideas. You ever notice how in some games, new characters like League of Legends are always so much more complex and interesting and more well designed than the first or the original ones? Same general concept. All right, roll. We're thinking a hybrid. It would probably classify as a ranged, melee, ranged, but it would. Yeah, we'll see what. It depends on what it does most often, because having ranged options means that you'd probably be more of a melee that uses scouting gear. And then being able to still do something from range, so you're not having to worry about uptime quite as much, and it can flex a little bit more. Or having a range with melee options, kind of like Red Mage. Because I'm thinking either it starts off with a gun or it's starting with a saber, and that's kind of its main thing. Because I wouldn't mind it being ranged and then having the saber for, close range stuff. We're trying to stay away from taking too much from 11. Like, yeah, I know what Corsair is in 11, but we're still trying to make this a little bit more unique for 14, because you just can't take stuff from 11 and apply it to 14. It just doesn't work, because the way that buffs work in 11 don't work in 14. The way that debuffs work on enemies in 11 don't work on 14. And there's just so many differences in just how a rotation-based combat thing goes versus even just the menu based combat. So we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. Aesthetically, yeah, it's going to be pretty similar. We're probably going to use something like cards, throwing cards like Gambler or Dice, something like that. Thematically, more Final Fantasy XI Corsair, but I don't know about WoW's Outlaw Rogue. But yeah, been avoiding playing cards. Oh, okay, so like avoid. So Dice, that would be cool. I really liked how they did that with gosh, what's his name in the 7 remake? How he tossed coins and shot his gun to like ricochet. That was kind of neat. That was an interesting idea. Throw mahjong tiles. Rufus, yeah, that's him. Ideally, there would be RNG in their attacks, but people would be more upset at that than not, because on paper, Astro seemed really cool. You're on the fly, you're figuring out what cards do you need. But people only really wanted one card, and they didn't really like the RNG, because then you'd be sitting there for however many minutes waiting for the card you actually wanted. So I think more people want versatility, but yeah, it'll depend on how, because just the general player base has not been very receptive to RNG. As cool of like a on-the-fly concept it is, in general. Talking about procs, I think people are more accepting of that. It's still annoying for some people, and the more class progresses, the more you're guaranteeing those procs to happen. So you see it in Black Mage with the Sharp Cast, and I think Dancer gets a few things where you're guaranteed to get this, at least one. So I guess it's more for consistency, but yeah, people definitely don't like. I think the fixed dice idea would help towards that. The OG Machinist procs, yeah. Machinist can even do his gosh dang rotation. Samira from League of Legends, primarily ranged with dual pistols, but switches to melee. Okay, so I think that's where we're going to have the biggest discussion on what to agree with. What will be the primary, what will be the secondary? Are we going to go primary range or primary melee? I think more people are actually leaning primary ranged with melee options. I'm thinking something similarly, Maiden. Yep. No mace job. We'll get there. We'll get there at some other time. We're going to focus on Corsair, Myoji, Voidmeister, and Magitech Pilot for now. Yeah, I'm leaning more towards rage. Yeah, like, because, you know, pirates have the pistols and stuff, but they're also like the swashbucklers. So that's why I'm saying it could go either way. But I think more people want to see him throwing dice or coins or cards. And not, like, the cards could be interesting in, like, I know Astro has cards, but they could be applied in a different way. It's kind of what I'm leaning towards, that we could make it an acceptable thing where it's not, you're not buffing somebody necessarily, but you're throwing it out. And if you could have a concept like where it's you're going the poker style, where it's a pair, 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, and then royal flush, and that would be the proc on how many cards you're throwing. Or you're doing attacks, and part of the RNG proc is that you're building your hand, and then you chuck those and as an idea. Just ignore the devs and have the cards act as the debuffs. Draw cards from a pool and put them on 4 buttons. Sounds that sounds a little bit too much like Astro, just where if they're occupying 4 different buttons, yeah, people just haven't been a fan of that level of RNG. I think sticking with procs is the acceptable level of RNG in 14. Because I like the concept, like if you could build a full hand. But that lends itself more to the action combat, where you're a little bit more on the fly. You don't have a set rotation. As soon as you get into rotation territory, having too much RNG it makes it feel really bad. But outlaw rogue. I mean, this concept is not original. WoW didn't come up with it. Final Fantasy XI didn't come up with it. We're not coming up with it. It's just an archetype that we're pulling from. That would be interesting to see in this game. So try not to go too much on but these people already did it. A lot of people already did everything. Hang on, let's settle this right now. So this is range, primary range, melee options. Similar to what we have for, and I think we were thinking about scouting gear for it still. So it can still fill a melee role if needed, but it's going to have more range stuff, mid-range stuff. Bard and Dancer are more proc-based to balance it. Wouldn't have Corsair being straightforward like Machinist makes sense. If you didn't want to have the Gambler motif, yeah. Yeah, you could definitely have it way more straightforward. That is a direction we can take it. For sure. For sure. Because, let's see, does anybody else have actual procs? Monk has it a little bit with Chakra. I think it's mostly the range. The range to have it, unless I'm missing something. No, that's a system. You don't proc eyes, you gain them, basically. Like, they're always guaranteed at a certain point in your rotation. We're talking procking as in like an RNG thing, like you use this attack and you might get your fans in Dancer. Or you use, your dots. I don't know even know how Bard works anymore, but your blood letter proc, stuff like that. Black Mage with Thundercloud and Fire Starter, even though 2 or 3 stacks now of Sharpcast. There are no more procs in Black Mage. They don't exist. they're not. Yeah, Red Mage has it. So, yeah, it is used quite a bit. And we can always lean away from it if it gets a little samey for people. But also people like, in some respect, some people like having a little bit more variety. Not just a strict rotation. Though if they don't want the strict rotation, they could always go to those other jobs, for sure. You would work towards your sword attacks. Okay. So some good ideas there. I'm going to make this note. Maybe shy away from proc due to oversaturation in the ranged category. Well, you still, like, Mirage Dive is guaranteed. A lot of people have gauges, so don't let that discourage you too much, Dragon Hand. A lot of classes have gauges. Every tank has a gauge, Bard has a gauge, Machinist has a gauge, Red Mage has a gauge, Dragoon has a gauge. Everybody's got a gauge. Monk technically has a gauge. Being able to build up to something isn't a bad thing, and that's something that a lot of jobs in 14 have adopted because it's a pretty good system. Summoning a ship into the field would be very distracting. I understand the concept for the LB, but I think a firing line of cannons would be cool as well. You still want a ship, like, obstructing everybody's view. Unless it, like, kind of came down like Midgard's armor, the dive for Dragoon. And then... yeah, that's why I'm saying Red Mage is very distracting, and you don't... you don't really want that once it's actually on the field, as cool as it may look in general. If it worked inversely from Red Mage, thinking Gunbreaker, and you build cartridges to power your gun moves. Yeah, that would be if we stick melee primarily and then ranged. And it really can go either way. I think most people want to see guns, dice, cards as some sort of like ranged attack, and then building up something for your melee combo, similar to Red Mage, or just having more options. Or if you go in, you could go in for melee stuff and then get a few procs and then go back out, so you still have something to do if you want to be a melee. I don't know. Incorporate a reload mechanic. Yeah, they don't like doing stuff with ammo. It just gets tricky, that's all. Let's go on to... we're getting into more like nitty-gritty stuff on how it will actually be. Let's go for the niche on Corsair, because we gotta get through these. Or it would be ideal to get through these, rather. So the niche that it's gonna fill is one hybrid class that we don't have, like Red Mage a little bit, which works towards Red Mage being a hybrid caster in the first place thematically. So I think hybrid would be a good niche. We only have one so far. And then what else would it bring? If we can't have it too supporty. Well, we can have it supporty, but that they always nerf the hell out of them. So they're very rarely worth bringing along, because Square is very scared, or very, I should say, cautious of making support classes too strong, because then they're worried that people are only going to want them to clear stuff, which some groups do. Generally speaking, no. People have meta jobs, but so many like ultimate teams and other stuff they just play what they want. Pure positional range job. No. No. You think you do, but you don't. Do you remember Urvana? We're gonna go into a geometry lesson here. To move on the small circle on the inside here around the boss, pretty easy to get your positionals. The further you go out, the distance you have to travel to hit them, considerably more, unless you have a lot of mobility. It gets very, very tricky. Just getting the head shakes out of me. Yeah, no. A skill like the Dragoon Tether. I'm not against the idea of having a partner, or having a kind of buff to give to somebody. It could lend itself, like, think about this. So we're doing the hybrid thing. If there aren't ways to get your melee combo off, like if you have to do stuff as your ranged roll, what do? What if you put the buff on a melee target and got all the procs based off of their melee attacks, so their uptime benefits you? And then if you're in a melee position, you need to switch, then you hit the ranged party member, and they deal, give you procs that you would get from, I know we kind of talked against procs, but something more akin to like building something like Chakra, then you just get another attack kind of a thing. Lady Luck or first mate, I like the idea of that. How would you get procs alone? You wouldn't have to worry about being ranged, or like you're not restricted to a position as you would be in a party. Because in a raid fight, you have positions you need to be for mechanics. In solo content, you don't. So you can do both. Or you put it on your chocobo. Same as how, like, what can Dancer give dance partner to its Chocobo. Like, I'm not saying you would never be able to get procs if you were alone. I'm saying if you weren't able to get your melee procs, you would put your first mate, you would assign your first mate as a melee that is getting those procs for you. Similar to, think Brotherhood from Monk. It's kind of the general direction I'm going with, but it would be a single person. Maybe since it's Gambler, what if the buffs are very RNG, but you also can get mediocre buff? I could argue... Interesting in design, but nobody would actually play it. And I'm going based off of how people reacted to Heaven's Word, Astro. It would work a lot better in an action combat setting, but not rotation. Not Final Fantasy XIV is just so much rotation based that level of RNG ruins the gameplay for it. So, idea is pretty interesting. I like the thought of, you know, the gambler bit, but that's why I would kind of shy away from that. You take their damage for yourself. I kind of liked that first mate idea. I don't know how many people were on board with my idea of the being able to basically pick a partner for what you need at the moment, and then that would make it so that, but I need my melee combo. What am I gonna do? This fight sucks. I can't get my uptime during this part. You just throw it on a... You can't use your melee combo, but you can still build stuff up from the melee that would empower your range. You know what I mean? Any gambler job heavy on RNG would be more limited like Blue Mage? Yeah. Could continue to take from Dragoon and have a battle litany? Maybe. Kind of like a gangplank type of thing. You fire your gun into there and give people some sort of buff. Like melee partner when using gun, range partner when using sword. Yeah, so like the idea would be you're building up... for sake of simplicity, you think red mage. You have your white mana and your black mana. I'm not talking about just ripping this whole idea off. I'm saying you have 2 gauges, right? One would be your range gauge, which could be you're amassing bullets, or we could go back to the idea of you're getting a full hand, like you're drawing cards, and then you're just like throwing it like, you know, Setzer or Gambit, and getting the more cards you throw, the more effect it has, basically, the stronger it gets. And then on the opposite side, your ranged attacks build up a gauge for your melee attack. Maybe you're coating your blade in gunpowder, or you're filling your cup with rum. I don't know. I don't know how to justify a gauge for, like, what would be the concept, the idea behind making your melee attack stronger. But you would basically be able to spend that as a melee combo. So the versatility of this job with the first mate idea is that if you need to fulfill a ranged role with a stack group, you cannot get your uptime, you would first mate a melee, and they would fill your ranged gauge for you. Or if you wanted to be more of a melee, you could fill that slot by making your first mate a ranged, and then they would help you fill your melee. Does that make sense? Yeah, Uthador. Yeah, it's a good, yeah, good concern to have, but like you said, the macros I think would help. Because especially if you're going into a party situation, it's pretty easy to switch on the fly. Kind of like how Sage might want to switch cardio targets. Yes. Yes. I'm excited about that. Is anybody else excited about that idea? I think that, for whatever reason, I feel like I struck gold on that one. That feels like a really cool... It feels like a cool concept. I need more validation from chat right now. I'm feeling really good about that one. I know it's mine, but at the same time, I like it. And I'd like to talk to people who have disagreements as well. This is not a circle jerk. Just so you know. I need my ideas shut down just as much as anybody else if they're not good. You know what I mean? Because I might have a stinker of an idea that just needs to be polished off. But if nobody has anything, then we can talk about it. Okay, let's do something like that where I'm gonna put the gauge thing up here. Okay, this might get a little confusing because it's like one's filling the opposite, but sharpen mid content again. Yeah, that's the true provoke, is sharpening or drinking a potion. All right, and I think we're talking about Saber. Sabers, guns, musket, like something a genuine gunner, not a machinist. Which I appreciate them making the distinction. Machinist is going to be more of a machine job, not just a gunner. Yeah, I was thinking something like you would have that a dual pistol. Like instead, if you want to do cards, or you as your like apex ranged ability, you would, or as your apex melee ability, you draw a second saber and just start like slice dicing and go all swashbuckler on them. These are, I'm talking main hand, offhand here. That would be interesting if they could ever do something like, I'm going to be, because you usually discuss strategy. You're not having to decide things on the fly too much. If you want to have your, I don't know, gun as a main hand and then sword as an offhand to kind of go with that. Or maybe you go full range and you just do 2 guns. That might be complicated for 14. I'm just spitballing ideas. Let's put a pin in that. Let's not go too much further into that. That's gonna get weird. That'll get really weird really quick. Oh, let's see. Have a way you can have a system like that work and have it work like Unbreaker's draw in PvP. Okay, where the role of your partner determines what benefit you get from your gauge, and consequently determines your melee versus range play style. I think that's basically. I think that's what we're saying. I think that's what we said. Where you pick your first mate as a ranged person if you need to fill your melee gauge, and then vice versa. Could bully the melee machinist guns into being only rifles and 2-handed. Oh, here's a concern with pistol machinist is already using guns. So I'm gonna go back to what I said with, say, what weapon does black mage use, and then what weapon does white mage use, and how are they different? Answer being, one is a rod, and one is a staff. So while machinists may have a pistol, this would be a musket or blunderbuss, so it would be classified differently. That would be the idea there, because it would also like function a little differently. So that would be my argument on to resolve that concern. Codex versus Grimoire. There you go. That's even closer. Okay, let's move on to Onmyoji. I think we're happy with the overall idea with course. I love anytime I discuss. This isn't the first time I've gone over a pirate style job. It's always the most fun to design. I've never actually like published a game or anything where it's been featured, but I hope to at some point, because it's just so versatile. Like, what aspect do you want to do, or like how much are you going to put into this from like the lore that we have culturally? So much fun. I'm going to put that in there because some people are going to come in here later and have the same questions, and as many questions as we can answer right out of the gate would be good. You flex between range and exactly, Maiden. Exactly. That's where we kind of ended up with this one. That was a fun one. What do you get from building the 2 gauges? Either a special like finisher attack similar to Forbidden Chakra, or you know how Dragoon has their Nastrond. Something like that, where your ranged ability would be stronger, or your melee finisher would be stronger, or it would empower either of them. You'd get extra for it. One idea that I had was that you're either, for the ranged, you're building a deck of cards, or you're drawing, so you get to draw after you get a certain number of like melee attacks in, and then you use that, or whatever. But solo, you'd be basically going back and forth. You'd be going through a range rotation, then switching to your melee rotation after doing that finisher, then kind of going back and forth in that regard. And then for the melee, you could be taking a swig of rum or something like that to kind of drunken fist, but with sharp weapons. Cannon strike from the ship. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could do, yeah. So this is going to be a magic DPS on Myoji, where the idea is going to be kind of a mix of Summoner, Beastmaster, and our first support, well, actually, technically the second support, Caster. First support caster being red mage because you have a little bit of healing and some rezzing. But this would be more of, I imagine it, you set up zones similar to Sacred Soil, or you are tossing around buffs to people through talismans. I'm talking about those little paper talismans. Let me see if I can get a picture for you guys so you know exactly what I'm talking about. On Yoji paper. Remember Sailor Mars? Something like that. They've got the inscriptions on them, and then they have different effects based on what you want them to do, right? Shikigami, stuff like that. This would be a lot more like, you also think Lulu. Somebody brought up Lulu from, though I think that was more for Voidmeister. But you could also think like that's the conduit, and then you summon your Shikigami through usually either paper dolls or those talismans. Ofuda talismans? Maybe. I haven't heard that one before, but I'll take your word for it. See a totem mage? Kind of like that. Yokai and Shikigami can... I've seen them sometimes interchange. No, because yokai are the actual demons typically, and Onmyoji use spirits that are... Sometimes they're demons, but they're usually not associated with like the parade. They're just it's contract based. So think the toads in Naruto, snakes, that kind of summoning style. More mitigation buffs. It could be. We could do mitigation buffs. We could do little attack boosts. We could, attack speed. Just something. I'm not sure exactly what yet, but some sort of zone or buff, or you just throw your talisman on to somebody, but I would say less RNG with it. Or maybe it's associated with the Shikigami that you bring out, and have a similar system where you, of Summoner, where you start with one, but instead of getting like all these different attacks, your talismans are affected. The struggle there is going to be making it more set apart from Summoner itself, but that's kind of the general idea there. Could you Mudra to change the talisman? Yeah, like you could probably do something in terms of what brushstroke you do, because if you see in the anime, they'll sometimes, they'll take out the piece of paper and they'll, maybe you combine different characters instead of mudras. Death Mark or Chain Strat, probably something like that, yeah. And you could also, debuffs on enemies don't typically work, but you could still put something on the enemy where it, that might work more for Voidmeister, but this idea is you debuff the enemy, but instead of a dot, you are basically taking the damage done to it and filling up a sort of, not a, for lack of better phrase right now, because I don't want to infringe on Dark Knight, a blood gauge, or like you're taking the vitality from the boss to basically give it to either your pet. I think that would be more for Voidmeister. Doing it more for like feeding your void scent on the pain inflicted upon the enemy that you're facing, and then summoning it forward. Or yeah, you could have your Shikigami and then apply talismans to that to change it or empower it or do something different to it. That could be cool too. The weapon would be it could be a brush, and then that changes like what you're drawing on the talismans. It could be the talisman paper that changes. For the weapon, it could be a focus of some sort. It could be a doll. Number of different options. We haven't really decided on weapon. A pen, yeah. A fan. Set down charms to draw out a boundary. Be interesting to like draw stuff out. I think just placing some would be good, or using your Shikigami to like when they expire. Like if you do your rotation right with them, then when they expire, they leave a puddle, or they explode and they do a heal. Again, very much like Summoner. I'm still trying to think of a way to move it past that, because conceptually it is quite a bit different from summoning primals, whereas you're summoning spirits. That sounds very samey too, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from with it. On Arcanist classes? No. Yeah, I think it would be similar to how you have, because you're basically summoning forth creature. Well, because you're doing the same thing. Because Summoner and Arcanist are very similar. That's what I'm saying, is that they have similar concepts of summoning, and that's through like their ink and the runes and stuff like that. But this would be a different, the Eastern, the Far East implementation of that discipline. You know what I mean? Yeah, they could be contracts with the kami as well, or the, I forgot the name, but the gosh, it's the Four Lords. Yeah, because I'm drawing inspiration from what they did with they introduced Onmyoji in the last Heavenstorm. If you did that quest, where the guy, he drew the tiger, and then the tiger was summoned, and then in another part of the story, somebody is setting down like a barrier, and they use Onmyo magics as healing in that case. So we've had the auspices, thank you. So we could have where you're summoning auspices and having them fight with you. There's a precedent for it with ninja as well. Yeah. Yeah, there's the Onmyoji and Basya. I forgot about him. Yep. The wind's out of my sails on this one, because conceptually I like the idea of, I wanted to focus more on the talismans and making use of those. And then basically you think of Onmyoji, they're either empowering things or sealing. You'd have some more like protective Shikigami, and some more of you're inhibiting the enemy. It's harder to do that because Final Fantasy XIV doesn't really like debuffs on their enemies unless it's specifically empowering you. Trying to consider what ways to go about it where it's still kind of summoning, but you're not summoner. You know what I mean? It could fill the healer spot as well, because at that point we'd have ranged, physical ranged, healer, ranged magic, and then tank. And we'd basically be picking the role there. The paint resource gauge, I like that. I like that idea. I like that as well, Cloud. The Wuxing, 5 elements, and Onmyo and Taoism. Yeah. Kind of, like you're not setting traps necessarily as much as you are, zones of healing. Similar to, like, basically a much more zone effect heavy than what you have right now for White Mage and Scholar. Shadow Flare the class. Yeah, basically. That would be another idea, Scoop, yeah. Where if we were going to go with the DPS job, we would have our Shikigami out, and then could basically take it through stages, or even just have one that comes out, and then we throw the talisman on it, and then it executes a certain effect based on the talisman that it's given. So you could have different options. You could have like the tiger, you could have the falcon, you could have the snake, or you could have the fox is a typical, fox or wolf is a typical one. And then based on the one that you bring out for the given situation, the bird could be more of a buff to the party, like a swiftness buff. So either a crit direct hit rate increase, a little bit of damage, or speed, a little bit of movement speed. That seems to be popular. One could be a dot on the enemy. One could be a shadow flare, like explode and leave a foxfire on the ground. Exactly, Dusk. Yeah, we'd have to decide one or the other. I think both are, like, if we wanted to fill one role, then we could focus definitely more on the talismans, and then we could still empower the Shikigami to give effects, and still have it healer. That's a 2-stage process: summoning the Shikigami, then the talisman, and then executing the spell, which isn't good for healing. So just talisman, yeah, just talisman for healing. Never mind. Yeah, you definitely can use them for like either the sealing magic, or your burning, or your increasing damage taken on it, similar to a trick attack. Or even that could be their version of a, like they might still have Addle, of course, but they could also mitigate by what they put on the boss, if Square wanted that to happen. Yeah, you could specifically have the seal or the Shikigami come out as spells themselves. So your spells are the Shikigami coming out and then casting. And you wouldn't have to worry about them to like animation. It would just be, I don't know. You'd still have some animation with it, but you're not worried about the pet doing it because it's just them coming out as a part of the animation for the attack or the spell. Ninja in Dark Knight, where you drop the totem for a passive effect, then have an ability to activate a concentrated effect. Yeah, we've got some flexibility with where this could go for sure, and it doesn't help. We can't really take anything from what Final Fantasy XIV has laid for them because there have been both defensive healer and DPS versions of this. But yeah, I guess an idea would be to each Shikigami could or talisman, I don't know. Along that line, you would be filling up those seals, and then being able to do something big. But that feels more of a, that could still be a healer, like similar to the Blood Lily and the Super Beam that Sage gets. Cool to mimic the 8 summoning style with using their HP or your own with the summoning charges. Use a shield, let the Shikigami take the hit. Shield breaks, you get a weaker version of the effect, but you get the full cast off. Okay, think about that. Yeah, I think we'll do that. Dusk, that'd be a good idea. Let's rein this in. Based on the ideas that we've had so far, what role should Onmyo do? We'll do 2 minutes. Let people think about it. Yeah, we need to make a decision, and then we can make more like actual refined choices. We're usually hitting the limit on when my brainstorming starts to fizzle out. I've typically got about 2 hours of brain power at a time. Going over that is, I start running out of juice. Out of combo-based caster. Start with the talisman, then summoning. Well, let's cast your vote. Make sure, check out the poll, and then we'll decide what direction we want to take this in. Because once we decide, then we can really like hone in on what should be its real gimmick, you know? Because it can go both ways. Honestly, it's got a lot of versatility conceptually. So I'd like the Shikigami idea and empowering them with talismans, or you specifically use talismans and you're more like zone controlling with buffs, debuffs, stuff like that for your party, or have it basically a half healer. You could also do that where it's kind of a meh healer, but it's doing a fair chunk of damage more than other healers would with the Shikigami. Looking at caster, okay. Good suggestions all around. Let me just say that out of the gate, you guys. That was tight. That was close. So let's focus on caster then. So the fill will be more support style. I think the brush GCD augments the next GCD to do something. Okay. Summoner with Bard utility, basically. Something like that, yeah. Because having the seals would be really cool. I'm trying to think of like how to unlock them though, because you could use just different talismans, or since it's a caster, instead of cast times, you could kind of go back to that mudra system. So you're not actually casting, but you're still taking enough time to set up your attack where that's going to be offset. You're just not going to be stuck in one place. So like say your GCD would be a part of a combo for, I don't know if that would balance out by doing bigger hits, if it should technically, but basically you know, seal 1, 2, and 3, then they do that effect, and then that's your attack. Seal 2, 3, 4, that another attack. 2, 2, 4, 1, stuff like that. Expect elementals you see there is the same types as Shikigami you can also see in the Compet, but including Seiryu. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, that would be. Yeah, the idea I think would be to go with the elemental beings or the auspices. Even like make contracts with them, kind of Naruto style, where they have a dwelling place, but you have a link between them with your Onmyo magic, and then able to bring them out to help you fight with certain effects, and then empower them. Either empower them with talismans. That way, you could still do it with the elemental beings as well. Instead of a 1, 2, 3, it's basic 3 combo skills. It can be number 1, 2, 3 in the order you press determines the order of the paint. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. Wind up. Are the Geomancers and the Onmyoji referring to the same thing in the 14 universe? They might be kind of cut from the same cloth, but different. I'm more of a fan of the auspices as well because we've kind of gotten a connection with them if you played through Stormblood, rather than like kind of faceless elementals. Though I'm not saying the elemental idea is bad. I'm just saying why I would favor the auspices myself. Yeah, Geomancers are Eastern Astros. Actually, if it's in the lore book, let's check it out. Let's see, Disciples of War and Magic, maybe? Let's check page 122. Alright, Swallow's Compass. The birthplace of Domin Geomancy. Chiseled into the Great Wall which cuts across the plains of Yangsha, between two of the Daryu Moon Gates, is the visage of Ganen, the legendary hero who united Doma. The first king of the new kingdom was not only a military genius, but also a master geomancer, and after his death this royal mausoleum became a holy site, to which his disciples would make a pilgrimage. Even from Hingashi and beyond, academics and monks would come to gather at what is known as the birthplace of Domin Geomancy. Such scholarly congregations were dispersed by the invading empire. Deeming the deified Ganen a potential primal threat, the imperial viceroy of Doma ordered the king's tomb sealed shut. The Geomancer's place of study was abandoned, and the Swallow's Compass fell into disrepair. So that's just the Swallow's Compass. The Palace of the Dead after that. See, as with others of his ilk, the Simian Auspice gained divine might after enduring a millennium of life. The Kitanda Shang, Sadamin's great sage, heaven's equal, dwelled in the Swallow's Compass to prevent his master's creation, the Tamate Bako of Geomancy, from falling into Auspice's or unscrupulous hands. See, the art of Geomancy, with its command over wind, earth, and water, so only 3, which is actually very similar to White Mage or Conjurer, can be employed as a method for constructing Tenkoto. Some few geomancers of the Swallow's Compass were capable of building the teleportation devices without the guidance of the Onishishu, but the knowledge of their techniques is now all but lost. That'd be cool too. Kind of a support that helps you, kind of like, was it Guild Wars 2? Illusionist? You'd place portals. Just help people like dodge to one thing to another. So like, imagine if you placed a portal on one part of the map, and then you got so one is like where you appear, one is where you go, or you could just like, if you step in one, you appear in the other, and you get knocked back to one, and then you just end up next to the boss again. Like you put a portal next to the boss, you get knocked back, you put a portal next to the edge or whatever, you get knocked back, and then you're right back to the boss. That'd be neat. Shikigami could be the Geomancer elementals, beings. Earth, wind, water, or contracted auspices, which could be cool. Imagine summoning Kiten Dasheng for like an attack for your LB. He just comes down and just summons a million copies of himself and just whack, 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 whack. Yeah, I think we could easily work ourselves in there, Cloud, because they need to prepare to reseal Shinryu. Like, they'd done it before, but I forget how the actual questline ended. Not Shinryu, Seiryu. Right? No, not Seiryu. What was the horse? Right? It was the horse dragon. Anyway, they had one where they wanted to keep it sealed. I don't think we actually defeated it, but they might want to, like, you know, travel with us to, you know, learn about the outside world, figure out how other, you know, places have dealt with challenges, gain new experiences by fighting with us. The same as they did with the other guy. I'm horrible with names right now. Yeah, it was resealed, but they might want to prepare for the next time, or, you know, that would be the idea. Could use sealing tags and a brush. Yeah, that's the idea for the weapons here, is that you'd have your brush. You'd hang it like where wands were, on your hip, and so like you'd be holding the talisman and the brush like this for your battle stance. Let me go back up. Can somebody you were talking about. I'm sorry to make you repeat it. Okay, so Wind Up was saying perhaps instead of a 1, 2, 3, it's the basic 3 combo skills that can be number 1, 2, 3, the order. So yeah, we're thinking kind of either mudras, in the sense of the mudra would be a seal. So you're putting the seal on the talisman, and that invokes an effect for it. And then talking about, you know, gaining seals or a certain power to, like, you know, associated with either Taoism or, you know, whatever else is associated with this discipline, or probably closer to Shintoism with how Japanese they've made it. That would be the kind of idea. How to do that on a GCD would be tricky, unless you are, you know, the words that you're putting on the talisman are technically like words of power. So you are basically, you know, writing it on the talisman, and then boom, you know, it goes off and it hits the enemy. Then you're writing the next one, and then boom, that effect goes off into the enemy, and then you're writing the third one, and then those combined in a specific way do something else. Yomi could also give us a reason to dip into more esoteric primal light beings like Tamama. Oh yeah. Like raptor form bonus. Oh yeah, we could also do something like that. Similar to that. Similar to current Astro. Yeah, I want to try and avoid it as much as possible, but something similar, probably. More on, like, either because Astro has it, Bard has it. They have similar things. Because Bard has the, once you make it through all of your songs, then you have, like, the party-wide concert that you put on. Casting seals on an enemy for a different effect. Yeah. Yes, this would be controlled. Yes. So I would probably say closer to Bard in that respect. But instead of like a big thing after like 2 minutes, it would be I'm running out of creative juices right here. I had more that I kind of wanted to go into with this. Like, conceptually it's in my head, but I'm having a hard time bringing it out. I really like let's at least write this down. Global or GCDs, let's say mudra like GCDs that put words on your talismans that have effects based on the combo. Because you could have somewhere, like, there is a phase where you're just debuffing the boss, or you're not debuffing, but something more like Death's Design or a Trick Attack. And then once you gain enough Omyo power, or ink, or however you want to do it, you can then channel that energy into summoning Shikigami for an effect. Something kind of like that. Something, it would kind of work out very similar to Ninja's thing, because you can also use your Ninki to summon the Toad Shikigami. I didn't mean to copy Ninja there. I think the only issue with this is that it'd be similar with Astra and their cards. Yeah. It's similar to Astra, but it's also similar to Bard. You see what I'm saying? like combining things. And it's also similar to Summoner because you have to have all 3 gems used in order to bring out Phoenix. So like they're similar, but are they the same? And is similar a bad thing? Is it a straight up infringement, or is it just we're borrowing the same system that works for another job? Place down different fields, different effect on the enemy, have a finisher that triggers an effect based on the combination of effects that the enemy has. That would be cool. That would be cool. Like yeah, figure out how it detonates. Astro, but the cards actually do different things. Yeah, basically. Omnioge are already prepared with their seals. Could layering said seals cause different effects on the enemy? Yeah, like there are those that have them already done, but then you also have them in certain, you know, media, as we said, that they have their brush and paper, and then they scribble something on and then toss it. So there are pre-made ones, but you can also like make them on the fly. Because the field effect would be kind of cool. You know how Ninja has their Doton, and if they do an AoE in it, then the snakes come out. Something similar where if certain things are, if the enemy has these effects, then the effect on the zone would happen. Because I think that zone would be really cool. Apply zones like we'll just say think Shadow Flare, and the seals you place on the enemy in these zones depends or cause the certain way. Because it could be something that, you know, detrimental to the enemy that these seals are placed on, but anybody in the field that has, or the zone that has like a good seal on them could, you know, once the magic has built up, they react in a certain way. The zones are probably cooldown based. Combination of elements does something different. Yeah, something like that. Because we don't need to flesh this out too much, but having, because I think we have the general idea here, being able to empower. We have the seal zones. What if it dealt with light and dark style damage? You charge throughout by attaining words. Can have a different style combo ending having one light, dark. That could happen as well. Lucrum for an AoE combo. That could definitely work for the AoE combo. There's a class of characters that use Earth, Wind, Water in Stormblood. Yeah, if you're talking about the Astra storyline, I believe that's the Geomancers we were talking about before. We were debating on making this more like just Shikigami style, or like the Onmyoji Summoner Talisman Sealing, or doing the Geomancer. Alright, a few more ideas here, and then we're going to move on to the Voidmeister, or Wardlock. Think how they changed Summoner to a lesser extent. Similar to some cause issues. I don't think it would cause issues. I know that we don't want to be samey. We want to differentiate it enough. And in this way, the Shikigami would be more partners than you. Your spells aren't changing based on the summons that you bring out. What the summon does changes on what you do to it. Is kind of the idea. Or the level of Shikigami that you're able to pull out depends on your, you know, level of gauge or the seals that you have access to. And more focusing on like I think we're leaning more towards the seals and the talismans and stuff like that. The zone control seems to be a bit more popular than, and instead of really summoning, you're more contract based. You're not channeling the aether of Garuda or the auspices. You're bringing them, literally summoning them. What we have come up with so far is a ranged melee hybrid of Corsair Gambler, where you would be able to pick whether you want to be a melee or a ranged, similar to how an Astro can pick to be a regen or a shield healer. How that works is that you have your melee attacks that empower your ranged attacks, and your ranged attacks empower your melee attacks. If you're solo, you just go back and forth between being melee and ranged. If you're in a party, though, you pick whether or not you need to be in the melee spot, or you pick if you want to be in the ranged spot. You pick a first mate of the opposite that you want to gain the gauge of. So if you want to play more ranged to empower your ranged attacks through your melee, you can't be in melee range as often, so you pick a first mate that is in melee range, and their melee attacks help empower your ranged attacks. And vice versa, if you want to be in melee, you pick a ranged first mate, and then they help you build your melee gauge. I think I said that right. Yeah, the first mate idea was very popular. We had a really good time with that one. It would be sabers and guns. They would be distinct from the machinist in the same way a grimoire or a codex is between summoner and scholar. And if you're going to be a stickler and be like, well, that's because they're from the arcanist class, so they're supposed to be similar. You can also think of rods and staves between black mage and white mage. So nothing you say will change our mind on that. That is what we have decided on. Silently, I'm trying to communicate this as well. So, and then we're going the Onmyoji route with a ranged caster, support style mage, where you are setting down more field effects. So, like throwing out a bunch of talismans, and then you've got this little arena thing going on, and then people within it are empowered, or the enemy is debuffed in some way. And then you're throwing out actual talismans in a combination or something, or using a Mudra-like system where your GCDs are putting on words. You're painting, brushing on words to the talismans in a certain order to gain certain effects, and then either throw them onto your party members or the enemy. And then having, once enough energy is built up or whatever, enough seals have been placed in the zone, then people are, empowered. The enemy gets a big damage. The big damage happens. Something like that. It's kind of where we're going. The specifics we're not going to get too much into, because that's a deep dive into what are those abilities going to be and all that. So I think for an overview, we've got something pretty good right now. That is where we are at right now. The next one, I think I want to put a pin in the Onmyoji right now. One, I'm running out of juice, and two, it's I think we can flesh this out really well, but at the moment, I think we've covered all the basics of what it will be. Does anybody have anything to add at all before we move on? Is anybody alive right now? All right, so this would be as well a ranged caster was kind of the idea. Now we're looking for a niche. Other people suggested this one, so you guys are gonna have to take the reins on this, because I don't. Let's see. The ideas were chains, enchanted cloth, like a scarf, or like something around your arms that would kind of whip around and attack. Is it a pet guy? Kind of. It would be more similar to Reaper, where I think you're summoning Void Sense as your attacks, basically. A lantern. Okay, Thresh. The weapon could be similar to Lulu. Yeah, that was the Lulu's dolls. I don't know what else to say for that. Lantern. Okay. Lantern as a alright, we could do a doll focus. Yeah, you could just have different ideas where some of maybe some of the gag weapons would be, you got the Moogle, of course, which would be, natural, but then you've got some of the minions. Your minions become your focus. Do Black Mage, Red Mage, and Summoner fill different roles? Kind of. Summoner's more of a cast less. It used to be the Dot Mage, but now it's more of a cast less. Like it has a few spells that you cast, but very few. The most mobile caster. Red mage is a supporter. Black mage is pure DPS. I think a burnout mechanic would work then for a caster where you have to overload or sacrifice some element to get void powers or summons. Elaborate. Power ourselves with the void. We need a medium to act as the energy siphon for the void gates. Yeah, one of my ideas was a crystal focus. And then you're just kind of like you're holding it like that and just it goes out. That's part of the chains idea as well, where you would be ripping open a void gate, sending through the chains, and then bringing them out. Or that you could still have the doll with you, that you summon the ethereal chains, send them through, not bring out the void scent, but bring out their essence and put it into the doll. And then the doll gets, you know, a shapeshift or something like that. You guys really want this class to be Thresh. I really don't think Square is going to go back to Dot Mage. They've systematically removed every dot from the game. They're not going to go back. So people, I'm not saying dot, I love dot and status style combat. I'm just saying Final Fantasy XIV doesn't. Nen is a good system. Nen was a very clever system. I don't know if 14 would do well with losing health as a mechanic, because it deals with unavoidable damage. Great system for something like action combat, again, or more freeform stuff, but Final Fantasy is too much guaranteed damage. So you're basically going to have to hold a lot of your stuff to make sure that any raid wides don't kill you. Dark Knight never lost health. People wanted it to, but also they wanted it to be a DPS, but that's just not how 14 functions. Oh yeah, Black Mage did sacrifice health for, yeah, it did at one point. Well, that's why I'm saying more of the doll temperance, because what we just learned from the Void is that some are too big to get through a gate, but you can still rip their essence through. So the doll would be that conduit. And just because it's normally done doesn't mean we can't do it now. Though I understand the idea of precedence. You know what I mean? I also just don't want to... I know people were talking about melee attacks. I don't want to entertain any more melee, really. Or some melee attacks could be fine, but Red Mage has that covered for the most part. And you in a fight, in a raid where most of Final Fantasy XIV content is, or party content where it's the dungeon, just party content, right? Everybody's got their role, and if you stack too many of a role, then somebody's gonna get scooched out, right? So if you have a caster, which is normally occupying a range spot further away on the field, require melee, then they're eking out a melee spot or running they're either losing damage because they can't get close because the melee are there, or it can just get really awkward with this system. It's just how 14 limits itself. One of my ideas was using curses. So you send out a curse on the boss, and the more damage is dealt to the boss with that curse, it kind of fills a soul or blood type of gauge where its damage is converted into a darker ether, and then it summons forth a void scent of that resonates with that level of curse. Yeah, we've been talking about a Lulu type caster. Like, that's one of the ideas for the weapon, is the doll focus, or chains, or enchanted cloth, or a lantern, or a crystal focus. The lantern I'm warming up to, because you could start like storing void energy in the lantern and then let it out to bring out a void scent. Or go to one of my previous ideas where you're not actually summoning a full void scent, but allowing them just enough space to do an attack. So like you could have a hole where a gargoyle's face comes through and it breathes fire. You can get an AoE. Or you have something that can reach through and, you two portals and their arms come out and just slash in front. A lantern and a knife. You have the Tonberry caster. I mean, don't get too caught up on, like, we're more like, it is what Lulu does, and she is a black mage, but we can still use the doll as a focus, because in 14 they usually use an inanimate object or statue or whatever it is for the soul of the void sent to inhabit. So that's kind of what we're going with for this. Not that just because it uses Lulu's weapon, it has to be what Lulu is at all points. That's just the idea that we're going for. Or you could, instead of Lulu's doll, you could think of Annie from League of Legends, where you just you're because you're bringing up the doll's changing size, you just summon Tibbers. But that would be tricky, because you'd imagine the doll would change model every time, unless the void sent that you're summoning is the same regardless. Otherwise it'd have to animate a new enemy type every single time they added a new weapon for Voidmeister here. Sigils, as in what? You were a different kind of ethereal sigil on your back. Maybe. No, I don't think we do all the different void sent. I think you'd have an AoE, which would be like you'd summon a big old claw or a void sent that does AoE. And then if you're doing the single target attack, like the same way that you're summoning, the toad sometimes for ninja, or doing other stuff with your things. It's just it's a part of the animation. You're not taming all the void sent. You're not making a pact with all the void sent. You're able to connect to the void in some certain way and get them to follow your will by providing them with enough ether, which is basically the idea of Reaper as well, except you're doing it more as a ranged job. Throw different aether lures for void sent to attack X enemy. Could work. Though you usually don't want to delay on your attack. You could make the animation quick enough. The draw feature from 8 to steal aether from enemies. That was kind of what I was thinking of earlier, by using curses. So you'd curse the enemy, or provide a curse mark of some sort on your ally, and then the more damage that is dealt fills the curse gauge, and then the curse gauge allows you to feed that aether that was gained from combat or damage or blood loss or whatever to the void sent that you want to bring out. And instead of like you're summoning a void sent and then you have a pet, and then we're in the discussion of it's another pet class, it's just you're able to use abilities similarly to how you're able to use different abilities on ninja with the Ninki gauge. So there's a lot of ideas on what what this one should be. It was a cool idea though. Somebody said claws as well. Could do claws. No, it's we're not talking about those claws, because they're not legit. Like, those are just knuckle weapons that look like claws, which make no sense. We're talking about like actual claws, like clawed gloves. Because monk is supposed to be blunt damage. It's a whole other beast. It's a whole different thing. Because claws are not a subtype weapon for monk. It's all knuckles, all knuckle weapons, and then they just look like claws, which is a stupid idea, and I hate that they do it every time. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seals or crystal focus, like things that you're holding that look different, but you're doing the same thing, or you're able to cast your curses or channel aether or whatever. Like, all these can work. It's just we're having a hard time finding one that works for everybody. Bells could be used for Geomancer too, yeah. But you could call the Voidmeister one Death Bells, and then the Geomancer one Nature Bells. Like, and then they're different. Yeah, I think people were more thinking of Pandemonium 1, where Eric Thonius, his transform state, but instead of binding, you're basically dragging through, dragging the essence of these void sent through the gate. Let's get off weapons for a little bit, and let's think of a niche first, and then we might be able to hone in on what weapons will fit best for this. So what are we thinking this one's going to be? This is going to be another pure damage. Is this going to be what else could it be, really? Like what's the benefit of playing this job versus summoner or versus black mage? A debuffer just don't work in 14, unfortunately, because you cannot slow enemies, you cannot stun enemies, you cannot like you can do it in dungeons, but for real content that matters, where it's going to be used the most, it doesn't work. You can't paralyze enemies, you can't stun them, you can't freeze them, you can't slow them, you can't heavy them, you can't sleep them, you can't do anything. I wish we had a debuff. I wish it was possible. I wish that was this style of MMO, but it's not. If you want to do dot damage, good luck. It's just like 14's been moving away from dots so much. They don't like them, and I wish they, I like dots. I agree with you guys. I like the statuses and stuff, but how flamethrower works. But so you're like a kind of like a. I'm trying to think of what you mean by sustained dot or channeled dot. I'd be down for that baller. I really enjoyed things in Lost Ark, abilities that I love those channel or charge abilities. I've been wanting one for Monk forever, where you're just going all JoJo's and ora, and just like over this. The longer you hold it, the more damage you do, obviously, and then what I think would be good for some of those abilities, kind of like Tenchi Jin, if they're ever interrupted, half the cooldown time. Or like basically get money back on what you weren't able to do. Like the cooldown is reduced. So it's not a huge damage loss. You're not running the risk of actually standing and stuff just to get out your damage. The Phoenix Blue Major, but oh yeah, that's right. Oh, you want life drain? Okay. Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I wish. So you channel it, you cast it to keep. Oh, okay. So, okay, interesting. Okay, I could see something like that working where you're. So it's not an actual dot. It's just consistent damage that you're channeling. I could see that with something like the Lantern, where you are basically sucking out the life force of the enemy conceptually, and you're doing that to feed your void scent. Yes. Okay. You know what? I'm for that. I could get behind that. I see what you're saying now. That would be on brand for this one. That would kind of work towards this life sucker style of job identity. It's called Champions Online. Had a vampiric DPS support build where putting a debuff on the enemy and not only increase your damage but gave out AoE heals within a radius. That'd be neat. I would say the longer you maintain the channel, like each channel would be a different either GCD or something, and then as soon as the channel ends, you're basically filling your gauge. I mean, every class has their AoE thing. Like you could still for your AoE, you could put down a pseudo void gate under, and like kind of like Shadow Flare, and basically siphon their energy to your void scent that then they come through and like do something. I want to avoid. I would like to see a caster have a transformation as well. That'd be cool, where you're channeling a whole bunch of void energy and just you turn into a void scent yourself. But yeah, we already have that with Reaper, but similar designs could have a magical girl transformation, the dark magical girl. We don't talk about Dark Knight auras here. It's too sad. It's too sad. I like that. Well, Like a channel casts where life force of the enemy is used to empower void spells. We might not even like actually summon void scent. We can just use void spells. You know what I mean? Like we don't have to worry so much about bringing forth void scent as much as employing the power of the void. Couldn't this class also kind of give the necromancy skills people have been asking for? Yes, but you can't call them that. You have to be. We have to be more clever about it if we want Yoshi P to, you know, ever greenlight it. You know what I mean? And that's the idea. Like these aren't going to be in the game, but we're trying to design them in a way that would work in the game. Anything else here? Like we haven't had channel casts. Like we've had cast times, but it's instead of doing damage at the end, it's doing damage over the cast, which is kind of cool. Yeah, but we're not dealing with death here. We're dealing with void, which is just dark aspected ether, as opposed to black mage, where it's just elemental ether focused on destructive properties, or the destructive properties of elemental ether. Void doesn't scream good guy either, but we already have Reaper, so that's out the window. You know, they themselves have already crossed that line, so there's nothing stopping us from doing that. They specifically don't want us dealing with death, though. It's not that it would go off; it's that the damage would stop. So you're basically, it's essentially a dot where it's not applied to the enemy as a dot, but it's like for 1 second, or like after 2 seconds, 50 damage is done. And then another 50 damage is done. And then another 50 damage is done. And then if the channel is stopped, then you just stop doing that damage. Yeah, you cannot reanimate corpses. That's a no-no. That's a Final Fantasy XIV taboo. So let's focus some more on like what some void spells could be. One big thing to remember about the void is that they employed a manner of transformation via something very akin to Auracite. So things that we've seen a lot in Basia and in the Ivalice raids. So I think they sealed the primals in the Auracite, and then that aether corrupted them, if I'm remembering correctly. Well, we didn't make the zombies. That's why zombies are fine. Yeah, zombie brand. You don't talk trash about zombie brand. That's another Final Fantasy XIV taboo. I'm trying to think if we can apply that, like the idea of corrupting ether. You know what I mean? Like I know we have to stray away from dots as much as possible, but we could still apply one effect. I don't know if it's a dot. We could also call it a curse, or we could call it, corruption, and apply it to the enemies. Corrupting ether like wildfire. Yeah, something like that. Well, let me say similar to wildfire, because that's not what wildfire does. So you have to do it in a wildfire window, whereas this one will just detonate at the end of it once it's sustained. I think that's good. I think that at least has more of an identity to it now. And we can more focus on... That wasn't very long. We can probably fit this one in here too. Can warlocks be angry miners? Maybe. We'll think about that. Or botanists. No, wait. Sorry. No, fishers, because we're taking from the Sea of the Void. We might... I think we're doing more of an armor thing. Yeah. Even if it ended up being a limited job, we're still going to flesh this one out. So we could do hammer. That would work for the weapon. Hammer or controller. The whole idea that I was thinking of with this Magitech pilot is basically maintaining your armor. So you never want it to break. But it will also protect you to a certain extent. So like, if you have all this armor, you're taking all this extra damage, but the armor is absorbing it. Why not just let your armor work as a cooldown. And the trade-off would be if your armor breaks, you're losing empowered abilities or access to certain abilities that are only available once you have your armor on, like either laser beams or bombs or whatever it is. If we're thinking like we're in a Magitech suit, or we're in armor like Nero has, or if we're in a mini like we're basically building an Iron Man suit or something like that. Yeah, so we're either thinking you're in a mech and you're keeping the mech alive through your cooldowns, or like I'm thinking the big your 2 minute would basically be resummoning your mech, I think. Or your 3 minute. Your big cooldown would just be resummoning your mech. Because if your mech dies, it's akin to you dying and losing your entire rotation. That's how I'm seeing this. So you're still technically, you've got not exactly a puppet master, but you got something else on you. So something like how Torbjorn from Overwatch summoning and upgrading his turrets, kind of, yeah. I think it would be cool to take some cues from the Varus fight. All right, let's see. Like you have a few bigger moves that require charging up first. Yes. You press the laser beam button that charges once the gauge is full. Press it again to fire the beam. Okay. You can move to other actions while this happens, but you could charge multiple skills at once. Banking that skill for later. Oh, okay. I'm not against that. I actually really like that idea. I like the charging. Thing. It reminds me of the library bank special item that they had in Beaufury, where basically you cast a spell and then it's stored in this bank, basically this little library shelf, and then you just get to cast it instantly for free later at any time. Not Maple. I'm thinking of for the charging bit. I'm thinking the Puzzle Kid, but also Mecha Maple would be would be this is kind of the idea. Like nothing else has done that before, and it's basically the same thing. Like you're getting your cooldowns ready, or you're preparing for your burst window or something like that. That's kind of cool. I like that. Gun shield. We could definitely put like this. We don't have to be in a mech suit, but we could still be in a suit of armor-ish type thing. MTK probably, or MGK, like Magitech would be the idea, or MGS, Magitech Soldier. Let me do that. Let me reword this. Let me do Soldier instead of Pilot, because the suit of armor idea is still good, but it may or may not be, you're piloting something versus you're moving it with your own body. Don't think tying the mech down to a 2 or 3 minute cooldown is a good idea, because you manage to lose your mech, say twice in a row, before the cooldown comes back. You're a lot more vulnerable, and the party effectively has now lost an entire tank roll. Well, that's the exact same thing if you lose your hollowed ground. That's kind of the idea of it. There has to be a downside to this, or it's the same thing as getting Brink of Death. You'd still be able to get your mech back. Like the mech isn't specifically tied to the 2 or 3 minute cooldown. That wasn't the point. The idea was you instantly get it back at the end of the 2 or 3 minute cooldown. You have to be able to receive damage. Yeah. I mean, you'd still have some stuff, but you're not going to be as effective. Same thing as if Dark Knight mismanages their MP. They're not doing as much damage, and they lose a cooldown, kind of thing. So you also reduce your ability to take damage. Or if you hit your cooldowns too soon. Like you're rewarded for playing your job right. Is kind of the idea. You know what I mean? You're not going to be like the biggest issue, I think, is more of what you have available to you. The armor is going to unlock a lot of your abilities is the idea. Like most of your skills are going to be tied to your armor. So losing it will hurt. And then you'll have to build back up to get it. Magitech, I like that. We could definitely do the gun shield. So you're basically just a big Garlean shieldy suit of armor. But yeah, the 3 minute cooldown would be to at no cost get your armor back, because you're basically able to die without actually dying. And then your healers could work on keeping you alive while you build your gauge back up and then get back into it. But you're doing a lot less damage and you don't have as many resources. And then you build back up and then do it. So then you would be able to basically take that hit that would normally kill you. Your armor gets knocked off. Then your 3-minute immediately puts it back on. Yeah, you're not necessarily screwed, but it would be the same as if like your rotation got reset on death. It's kind of the idea of what I meant with if you lose your armor, it's the same thing as you died, because you're still losing some stuff. Yeah, that's kind of more the idea. So you're basically able to take enough damage, you know, all that extra damage. So you're still cooling down so your armor doesn't die. But if it does, then you still have your whole other health bar along with it. You know what I mean? Not necessarily more tanky because you're still in plate armor, but just another health bar essentially. Like Iron Man Mecha Tank class, dealt with maintaining energy and using technology to keep yourself alive with nanomachines. Energy shield, kind of, yeah. The idea is to kind of either channel your aether through mana to repair, or even use your life force, because you could use your life force to keep your mech alive. With kind of the biotech that they use in the weapons storyline, you could do that. And then the healers heal your health, but your healers can't heal your mech. So you're responsible for healing your mech. The healers then replenish the life that you've lost. Yeah, the synthetic RSI system. Yeah. What would the armor be like? Slaying or maiming? Oh, as far as like the gear that you would have, like your mech suit, I'm thinking very Garlean style, and then the regular armor you'd be using would be kind of like, or your AF armor would be more either modeled after some of the Ruby weapons or like judge gear, kind of like how the Garleans had. This is a very much Garlean inspired job. So let me write a few of those notes in here. That's my bad habit, is that, well, I wanted to confirm that it was cool with you guys, just for ideas here. You could have the MP bar act as the armor health. Oh yeah, we could. Okay, yeah. It's not a bad idea, Obs. I was more thinking though that the cooldown would be allowing your armor just to take the brunt of all this damage, and then immediately get it back, rather than blowing yourself up and then rebuilding. I'm not against the idea of, if the armor hits critical damage, to be able to blow it up. But the 3-minute ability, and like it does some damage to you and yourself, so it would be a tank swap system. Like, hey, I need to swap. It blows up, does some damage to yourself, you get healed back up, and then you start building up the resources again. So instead of, like, there could be a detriment to letting it die versus just detonating it. I don't know. We could always kind of go that route though. It would be it would be very wonky with healing, but yeah, for the tank healer thing with this, the tank would be sacrificing their health. Like if the healer healed the suit of armor, only the tank would be getting health. So if the tank is the armor isn't affected by the healer, it's affected by the tank managing their resources. Like if the armor soldier guy himself has to do an action to heal his armor, so before healers can heal them, this goes with the play loop as well. Yeah, but I mean, like, if you mismanage your healing as well, you're gonna die anyway. It's kind of the idea. So optimal play would be avoiding that situation with proper cooldowns and stuff like that. Oh, you know what? Here's what we could do for the detriment. Instead of punishing the tank with health, if you decide to detonate the armor, I won't even say that if it reaches critical. You can just choose to detonate the armor. Penalty to resources needed gained to rebuild. So something like you could do at the end of the fight, or if it's about to, like, your armor's about to get knocked off, right? So you're going to, and then bypassed by the 3 minute. So you get it like 2 or 3 times per fight, basically. I mean, you yourself want to be at full health, but it will be to make sure that your armor isn't taking so much damage, but also managing it so that you're only giving up a certain chunk of your life at a time, so that your healers can also keep up with healing you. So it's almost in a way, it's kind of like the lifelink totem, where you're just taking damage a lot slower you're able to control how much damage you're taking every time. It's kind of the idea here that I'm thinking of. Having a bar that ticks down and doing a proper rotation keeps your Magitech running by siphoning Aether from your enemy and beating the... was that either? Okay, so like proper rotation also, similar to how Warrior's rotation kind of heals them. Yeah, I could, like, if you have your armor on, there could be a self-repair system. Because we're talking about like an organic or a synthetic R-site system. It could be pseudo-organic, where it heals itself as well. Instead of having the armor take all the damage, it only takes part of it to help mitigate. Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm really... What I think it's going to boil down to, which is going to be really hard, is Corsair and Magitech Soldier. Gosh dang it, these ones are fun. These are fun ideas. These are some fun ideas. I will be taking these to Patreon later, and we're gonna flesh the hell out of these. Like we'll talk more about these, but we're gonna pick one later on. Let me put that down as well, Soul, before I forget. Similarly to how you have Dark Knight, have to choose between, do I want to attack with my resources or do I want to defend with my resources? Of course, the defending with the resources can lead to a free attack, but we can talk about that later. I think the timer ticking down. Proper rotation. Or okay, timer. Did I miss with the pilot? We're at a pretty solid area with it right now. So let me talk about Corsair real quick for the people who weren't here. And after I go through these, I'm gonna call it. It's about time for the stream to end anyway. I'm burning out. I'm surprised we got the Magitech Knight, the Magitech Soldier. So like, that's awesome. We got some really good ideas out of that one. So for the Corsair, we're looking at a hybrid melee range. So think about, we're thinking about like scouting, but this is a job that can choose whether it wants to be melee or ranged, similar to how Astro gets to choose between shield and regen healer. Say you're playing solo, you're out in the open world, you're using your, let's say you're starting on range, you're picking off enemies before they can get to you. Those range attacks will build up a melee meter. Once the melee meter's full, you either, it makes your melee attack stronger for a certain amount of time, or it gives you a melee attack. Then you switch to melee, since you don't have a tank anyway unless you have a chocobo, and then you are doing your melee combo, and then that melee combo fills up your ranged meter. Your ranged meter then gives you a super range attack, and then you just keep going back and forth, ranged and melee. But what if you're in a party and you're filling the range role? Well, now you're going to have a special ability like Dance Partner that's called First Mate. You pick your first mate. You're going to be ranged. You're going to pick somebody to be your melee first mate. Their melee attacks will then fill your range bar, and then you can stay strictly ranged. Or if you need to be melee, then you pick a ranged first mate. Their range attacks fill up your melee bar. So then you can still, you can still go back and forth and do, your melee attacks. If you want it, say you want to fill your range bar even faster, you pick a melee first mate, you go in when everybody can stack together, then you're just building your bar twice as fast, you're getting your range attacks buffed up. That's kind of the idea here. And we're using sabers and guns, musket, blunderbuss as your range or melee weapons. And then to distinguish it from machinists, think about how Black Mage has rod and White Mage has staff. Technically the same shape of weapon, they're doing similar things, but they're also for different purposes. So Machinist has like pistols and stuff. These would be specifically like blunderbuss, and that's how they would be categorized. Or Grimoire versus Codex. Same books, different option, or like they're summoning different things. Went over Onmyoji kind of as like the Shikigami, either summoning Shikigami or doing like more of a we're zone controlling, we're buffing things, we're healing, or we decided to go for a ranged caster instead of a healer. Those were the two options based on the kit that we saw Onmyoji having. And yeah, kind of mudra based seals, or you'd like put words on your talismans and then toss them out, and then like the combination would change the effect and what happens. Then you have like a special brush and pen and stuff like that. Voidmeister or Warlock, you're basically siphoning energy, so it's kind of like a dot without applying a dot to the enemy, but you're channeling life force from the enemy, and then you're using that life force to basically go into the void and corrupt ether. You're using void spells. And we could not decide on a weapon for that one. We were all over the place with that one. Between chains, enchanted cloth that kind of goes out and takes different shapes and attacks, or a doll focus like Lulu, or Annie with Tibbers, a lantern to keep the energy in. I think we're more leaning towards the lantern, to be honest. Crystal focus would also work. Bells to bring forth. Like we were thinking maybe we summon some Void Scent, but that was getting like logistically really tricky lore-wise. So figured, what if we just used void spells and just corrupted the enemy with something like Wildfire, where instead of amassing damage within a certain window, you are amassing energy. Once it hits a cap, then it explodes. And then the Magitech Soldier, or I'm going to put Knight. I think Magitech Knight would be super cool. Be a tank role. Your big thing is resource management. One idea is to be able to charge your suit of armor. You have a Magitech suit of armor. That's your thing. Basically, that'd be tricky for the dev team to keep making like suits of armor for different weapons, but you could always like change instead of changing the armor, you're changing the shields, right? So, because we're thinking gun shield or hammer. Either way kind of works. But be able to like use resources to charge an ability, and then you're able to like use it later. So a lot of downtime management that's possible, or you just, you're charging, you throw your shields out there and you're charging up and then a beam, but then you could choose to save that charge for later and just like start amassing all your abilities when the boss is untargetable or something, because it happens all the time. And then as soon as the boss comes down, you turn into Maple from Bofuri and just destroy, and then the idea for this is that the Magitech suit is going to have its own health bar. So as long as your Magitech has health, your health bar isn't touched unless you decide to. So the idea is you are basically, this is a synthetic type of like synthetic organic mix, this weird sin against nature hybrid of Magitech, where you are think of like the lifelink totem in WoW. You're basically able to heal your mech with your health, but instead of getting bursted down, it's a more steady. Your health is going down slower, so that your mech is being sustained, or something like that. You could be in like a tank stance where you're channeling, you're charging, and you're like, maybe, I don't know how it would be, but you'd basically be putting your health into your mech, and then the healers would heal you back up. And then if the armor dies, the access to a lot of your abilities are lost. You can't charge anything up anymore, and you have to build up through your rotation to get the armor back. The big CD, instead of like hollowed ground, like preventing damage, is you'd be able to let your armor die, essentially, and then just bring it back right away. We were thinking about the choice to detonate your armor. So just self-destruct mode. And then if you decided to do that for the extra damage, you would need to build more damage, or it'd be on a longer cooldown to get your armor back. Or if you use your 2-3 minute skill or ability, that would bypass it. So you'd be able to detonate it once, like take a lot of damage, detonate it, and then just bring it right back, and then start over again. Doing the proper rotation time, or having a timer-based bar. will give resources or enable abilities for the armor to heal itself or do more damage. Something like that. So it's not just your health. You can still manage your rotation and your resources with the armor properly to maintain it as well. And then it would either be probably the hammer or the gun shield. And those are the 4 ideas. So like I said, the Magitech Knight and Corsair are definitely my favorites of tonight's. Which shields from healers take priority over the armor? That is, let's see. No, shields would basically be useless on this one. Like, you'd have to be out of your suit for the shields from your healers to make a difference. We'd have to figure out how that would play out. Maybe the shield could be consumed instead of your own health to maintain your armor. So instead of taking your own health and damage, the shield is being consumed instead. As like a temporary health type thing. They'd have to decide how they want to do that in the programming. Those are the ideas. My throat's sore. Oh, we're ending at a really good time. So we got through all that. That's great. We got through all 4. I'm really happy about that. I was really worried as soon as we really hit a wall with Voidmeister and Warlock. Those were tricky. those were super tricky. I don't know where I'm going to put this. I'll probably keep it in my Discord or something, or even in the general Discord, the Nestling Discord that we have, so that people can look at it and catch up with what we were talking about. Oh, we're following up on this. I'm going to take it to Patreon. So if you want to vote on which one we're going to pursue for the video series, get yourselves on Patreon. Help us out. Support the channel. Really helps us out, and I figured this would be a good way to encourage people, one, to support, and also engage further, and also reward people who are supporting financially. But yeah, even if you only do $1, which I don't know if it's even worth it, but $1, $5, $50, every tier is going to have access to that. I'll go ahead and adjust that on Patreon later so you guys can see that. But yeah, I'm going to post this on Patreon, and so that people can then decide on what we're going to do. So thank you guys for hanging out. This is actually a good stream. I'm surprised to see so many people engaging in this, and I'm really happy that more people are, and I hope to get more people in here in the future. But we'll have to show everybody that we're doing good work over here. So yeah, the next thing is going to be, I'm going to pose it to Patreon, and then we're going to pick one. And then we are going to, next Monday, talk about a lot more specifics. What are we talking about on a rotation? What different skills are we going to see? What kind of mitigation or what kind of resources are we going to have to use with this job, and really make it more of an actual job. And we'll probably do that for a week or two, depending on my energy level, and then start making videos. Or we'll do it next week, get some ideas, and then make the first video, and then have people give feedback on YouTube as well. So I'm going to need to get an artist to do some concept art for this thing. Help us out. So anyway, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I really had fun on this. Hope you guys had fun too. We'll be back throughout the rest of the week. I think tomorrow we're going to do some more mount farming, and then we're getting close to the next patch coming up in the next month or so. So Nest stuff's going to be kicking off again. But yeah, we'll be doing more of this, and I hope to do this more consistently. It might not always be jobs. We might come up with different raids, different fights, different end game content in general. But yeah, this kind of game design style is what I want to do on Mondays. So thank you all for hanging out. Hope you have a great rest of your night. Check us out on Patreon. Get your gamer subs, and see you next time on the stream.